you cannot achieve something if you don't do it. Of course, and this is where the scientific part comes into place. We don't do it just out of the blue. There are analysis behind it, but that's the difference that we say, okay, let's take the risk.
Well, hi, and welcome to another episode of the Hiring Excellence Podcast. I'm Johnny Campbell, your host for this show and CEO and co founder of Social Talent. And today on the show, we're going to be digging into the science of recruiting. I have someone who actually came from a science background, who then got into recruiting for one of the biggest life sciences businesses in the world. And we're going to be digging into how he's used his background and profession in his company to basically bring a scientific approach to how you scale hiring in 2026. My guest today is Otto Vazquez. He's joining us from just outside Munich in Germany. And Otto is the global head of talent acquisition for Sartorius, one of the biggest life sciences businesses in the world and German headquartered. Although by his accent, you might be wondering, am I lying, Johnny? Or what are you talking about? But I'll let him explain that a little bit more. Otto, you're very welcome to this show. Perhaps you can share a little bit with our audience about where you originally hailed from and how you ended up in Germany working back in life sciences.
Glad to, Johnny, and thank you very much for having me in your show. I'm very pleased. I was also very excited when I got the invitation. So, yes, Otto is my name. I am originally from Puerto Rico, and I was studying biology in Puerto Rico. Left the island when I was around about 19, and I was in the US where I finished my biology degree. And right before I started my pre-med school, so I was going to be a medical doctor, this is where I met someone special in my life back then, and she was a German girl who at that time came to Germany, and this is how I ended up in Germany. Here is where I actually started my professional career, and this is where I actually did completed two further degrees that I acquired here in Germany, and the second one degree that I acquired was basically one degree that might not be so relevant for HR. If you think about it, it is actually very relevant for HR, and this is actually in education. So I'm actually a high school teacher, and this is where it led me to my HR career. How did that happen? Just right before I started with the school, I indeed got an opportunity at a startup, and then I commenced my career, developed within that sector, grew in team size, also in responsibility. And about 4 years ago, I joined Sartorius, where I have been leading the talent acquisition organization for the past 2 years, as it is right now, with APAC, the Americas, and the EMEA region integrated. And this is basically what I am currently leading, and very excited to be here. And yes, looking forward to our discussion today.
I remember when we first connected, Otto, I got a blast from the past because you used to work for a company called Expertier, and I used to recruit for the reinsurance market in the DACH region. I used to try and headhunt folks to work in Switzerland and other markets around Germany and Austria. And I remember using Expertise services to advertise our jobs, to search your database of candidates as well. So you not only worked in-house TA, you've worked for suppliers, providing into the industry, working with different agencies and different folks, and being very well influenced. So I really appreciate your broad background in recruiting, not just the in-house experience. I love the fact that you started life or your career as a scientist, but as we learned over the last while, Otto, you've worked as a lifeguard, you've worked as a DJ, you have an interesting background, and I really, really love that. Although I want to focus on the recruiting piece, maybe start with Sartorius if you don't mind, because Sartorius might not be familiar to many of our listeners. Wasn't familiar to me when we first reached out, but it has a fascinating history that is deeply rooted in science and the scientific method, even down to where you're headquartered. So maybe you could share a little bit with our audience about the size of the organization, type of products that the company produces, how long it's been in business, and maybe finally where you're located in the world and why that might be relevant to some folks.
Certainly, certainly. And it is indeed something very special for me when I talk about Sartorius because of the impact that I could create in my area and the impact that it had in my career. So Sartorius is based out of Göttingen. This is where we have our headquarters. We have around 14,500 employees. We used to have more. Now it's actually 14,500. And when I arrived there, there's a sign. It's written in German, but it's kind of a word game. And it says Göttingen, the city that makes science. And this is something very unique. This is the university with the most Nobel Prize winners in the world. They have over 40 Nobel Prize winners in the world. So it's a city that lives out of science. So you can see that there's a Sartorius quartier in the city, and this is where they have this kind of R&D, very prestigious university as well. So you breathe science everywhere. You breathe innovation everywhere. And this is actually what I perceived when I got there. So by getting there and then all of a sudden seeing this huge campus, very modern, and I saw basically their mission and their brand promise, and they say we simplify progress. And this is what you see everywhere. And this is what I really enjoy about Sartorius, this simplification of progress. So we're talking about how do we simplify progress in finance? How do we simplify progress in IT? How do we simplify progress in HR? And now more specifically, how do we simplify processes in TA? And when I saw that, this was a calling for me. So basically, when I joined Sartorius, or before I joined Sartorius, I was looking into their website. We're looking at what they do and looking at all their products, their mission, their vision, their brand promise. And this is what caught me. And I saw, oh my God, there's so much to do there. There's so much that we can do in terms of employer branding. There's so much that we can do in terms of candidate engagement, in terms of getting that mission out there. As I mentioned, I started studying biology. End game was going to be being a medical doctor because I wanted to help people. That's my mission. That was what I wanted to do, helping people. And okay, it was not what I ended up as a career and as a profession. Nevertheless, I can say that with the impact that I bring to the world, I am actually doing something. And we're actually enabling more scientists and other companies to create better products, to engage also with different kind of research that are currently ongoing and different kind of treatments. So understanding the science behind it and then applying one of my passions, which was always science, to talent acquisition, where I also found my passion and where I also found my profession, and I really enjoy all the, let's say, analytics part of it that imply also talent acquisition. And I always like to emphasize and remark that talent acquisition is not the same as recruiting. So I am talking here about talent acquisition and a more, let's say, strategic approach in this case.
Otto, this scientific method, this appreciation of the data and the science behind recruiting is super interesting because you, just like many of the guests we've had on recently and many of our listeners, are under similar pressures to make sure that you're delivering higher capacity, higher quality, more throughput, more efficiency, whilst not necessarily getting an equivalent bump in budget. This is
Mhm.
probably the email of 25, 26, where we're trying to really look at efficiencies, really look at scale. And
Mhm.
you've taken a very interesting approach to that and managed to have really good outcomes, which we'll touch on as we go through the conversation. But you might maybe start with, you know, the structure when you first come in. Maybe describe to me,
Mhm.
what was in place, how that structure, how did you review the structure, what needed to change, and maybe how you began to realize value out of changing the structure to kind of deliver to a global business because you're hiring all over the world, if I'm not
Yes.
mistaken, Otto.
Mhm. Definitely. So, and this is basically the main aspect. So when I joined the company was basically um, in hyper growth phase. At any given time, we had over 1,000 open positions. So it was a phase we went from, let's say, 10,000 employees to 14,000 employees. So when I arrived, it was a phase where we were just growing. This was 4 years ago. And of course, processes that are working for 10,000 employees will never work for 15, 16,000 employees. We were hiring 30 new colleagues on a weekly basis in only one. one site in Puerto Rico every single week. So the talent acquisition professionals there, they were working so hard. So how do we simplify processes? How do we simplify go to market that we also had? And this is basically where I started looking at what we had. And when I arrived, we had a team in the US, a team in UK, France, another one in Germany, and APAC was more or less consolidated. So we had different teams, and we had, let's say, a global approach. Nevertheless, um, it was not until we started really aligning all regions to a global concept and understanding that we're not talking about headquarter processes. So we're unifying everything. How did we do that? With a lot of automation, I have to say. We went in certain cases, if we wouldn't have had this automation element, we wouldn't have been able. So the team in the US, for example, go to market, they were seeing candidates at a very, very rapid pace. So they need, of course, they need some sort of a tool that will help them get that speed. How did they do it? They did it with a one-way video interview. This one-way video interview was already providing the first contact point, the first touch point from the candidate. We already had them. We already have a pool, a candidate pool, and we can even go back to that interview and show it to another manager. So now we have another concept here. So it was really getting that concept from one country. What are they doing good? Okay, very good. Now, what is the best practice in France? And they have amazing ideas because each region, they always think outside of the box. So bringing them all together. I think if my team always says something very positive, is the unification that they had when we brought everybody together, understanding that we work together, understanding that a colleague in India was having a hard time because they were hiring so much, but a colleague in Puerto Rico was waking up at 5 in the morning to support that colleague in India because they're having such a good bonding that it doesn't matter if they have to wake up at 5 in the morning. So creating that mindset as well. So it was, you could see that everybody was on board. So it's really a cultural shift that we're actually addressing as well. Going from a hyper growth phase, a company that's been around for about 150 years. Think about that. It's a solid company, but what I really enjoy is that there's some sort of a slight startup mentality in terms of, do you have an idea? There's a green field, pitch it. If you have the idea, do it. And that I have to be very thankful to the company I work for because I did have that opportunity to actually lead, create, and innovate to a point where I am very happy, and also with the success that we had in the company as well. So
Well,
that's just
what was the
briefly.
secret? What was the secret to getting that culture, Otto? Because it's not easy to persuade someone to get up at 5 in the morning to help a colleague on the other side of the world. It doesn't just happen overnight, right? A lot of people, for example, just resist the whole idea of recruiting outside their own market. So, what do you think was the main difference that really worked for you to allow that global scale to get the people bought into the new behaviors and processes?
I started this kind of initiative in terms of, let's say, more of a global mindset, getting everybody together, more of that initiation. And you just need one domino piece, one domino stones. Just click it, and everybody loved it. I made it, well, not that I made it, right? But what I showed them is basically what I see every time I talk to someone in the US. It's a new way of seeing things. So they started scheduling 30 minutes chat with each one. It doesn't matter where they were. Their task was 30 minutes, and they discussed work, best practice. They discussed their coffee break, maybe. Take a coffee break, but take it with someone outside of your region and get them together. And I have to say, every time I got my teammates together, this is the point where bonds were created. This is where you really feel the culture as well. So getting everybody aligned, and I was traveling during the first 2 years. I was traveling quite often to the US just to make sure that everything's built well. But I made sure that I established that relationship with the team, that they know that they will always have someone there. It doesn't matter if it went wrong. Things go wrong. We learn about it. Tell me, we can fix it. Let's move forward. I think being an example as well and seeing that every time I was not saying, no, we're not talking about the German process or the process in Germany. We're talking about the global process. And if you hear that 1 year, the second year it's already there and it gets stuck. And by the third and fourth year, it's just run. And that's what they desire. That's what they really enjoy. That sense of community and
And
belonging, sticking
But but
together.
but I sense there's also, an approach you took, which was a respect for the fact that not all the good ideas would come from one market. You hinted at the fact that you took an approach to look for best practice across the globe, and regardless of where you found it, you brought that to the global stage by making it the international standard, so that it was never, to your point, German standard. It was Puerto Rico, it was US, it was India, it was Mexico, wherever you might find it, it was a good example of a process you could scale that globally. I guess that says to people, we respect good ideas no matter where they come from.
No
Again,
matter.
back to not the politics, but the science of, does it work? If it works, then we'll make it work for everybody. Would that be fair?
Definitely, definitely. No, I can definitely agree. And I have to say, one very very important aspect for them as well was understanding how talent acquisition works. When I started working with them, they were recruiters, and that was their title as well. So they were doing recruitment. Recruitment, I always talk about it as the operational part, right? The active part of getting someone on board. But the strategic part is not something that was well present. Of course, they know because they are talent acquisition professionals, but not to the extent that we needed to develop. So I understood the status quo, understand where are we, and also with data, right? So they also need to see. So this is how we will be proceeding in the future. We have this data, and based on the data, we need to do this in the US, we need to do this in Puerto Rico, we need to do this in the UK, and in France it's different because we have this data. So it was a cultural shift to a certain extent, I have to say, and that cultural shift helped with data. It was actually one of the main drivers. I would say that data help us have that credibility. This is basically what gave us the credibility because you have the idea, you have the mindset, but it is only an idea, an illusion until you can say yes, but it's possible. And this is what they saw. We got all those processes and we finalized them.
You also mentioned, Otto, obviously the mindset for change is important, but also you wanted to get the team to move their mindset to be more of an advisor, a business partner, rather than transactionally recruiting. So talk me through your learnings there. What was the before? What was the after? And what kind of new behaviors were you trying to develop?
And this is definitely something that I learned previously joining Sartorius, and it is that evolution in terms of where a talent acquisition professional should be at the end and the different stages. So you have the recruiter stage, then you have kind of a mid stage, and then you have the, let's say, the talent acquisition professional who might be very skillful in all areas, branding, sourcing, that kind of professional. And when I joined, we were basically in the recruiter phase. So we were I'm not saying that their qualifications, but in terms of strategic approach, it was more in the beginning phase. We moved to a mid stage, and now we're transitioning to the last stage where they are all well aware. They know what market mapping means. We do our own market mapping and automated dashboards with artificial intelligence, comparing the market, comparing us with the market, comparing the skills, the trend, and so on. And this was the evolution from, let's say, a recruiter into a talent acquisition professional. Let's say the next evolution should be more, even the next one should be more of an HR, pardon me, a talent acquisition business partner. That should be the evolution, being the sole person when it comes to the strategic approach in terms of market analysis, in terms of market knowledge. There should be that kind of approach to be more precise, to be more conscious in terms of branding, in terms of targeting and audience, of course.
You also took some tactical steps to, again, look at the data, look where there was a lot of spend that could be saved. And one of those areas, I believe, was exec search. So talk me through that particular project in terms of what did you find when you looked at the data and
Mhm.
what did you do about it? What were some of the outcomes?
Yes, things that was also another topic that I saw when I joined. We had there were a few millions. Let's just say there were a few millions spent in headhunter costs. These costs were, of course, triggered due to certain aspects such as hypergrowth and so on. Nevertheless, as I mentioned, when I joined, I did a status quo, I did my due diligence, and I realized that the amount that was spent in terms of agency spends and so on could be reduced if we have our own structure. So basically now we have a very solid structure within talent acquisition where we have some coordinators taking more of care of the administrative part. We have talent acquisition professionals, and this is basically what made the difference, which was the talent sourcing team. This team is basically the one that are looking into the market, creating the market strategy, understanding the skills, looking at the candidates, creating the talent pooling. And as I always like to, let's say, divide it in three pillars, we have the first pillar, let's say, fishing for talent. And this is where we put all our JDs and so on. We post it. We have the hunting for talent, and this is their responsibility. They hunt for the talent, but they also farm talent. And this is the third part, right? So understanding that farming aspect as well and engaging with them as a candidate relationship kind of matter, this is also very, very important. So we went from over 3 million to 333,000. I think this is a significant decrease in Headhunter. Um, so very proud of that. And of course, this is also due to the team. We look at this at all the global contracts that we had. So we ended up, let's say, reducing a lot of spend due to these changes that had such a big impact. So that's what I mean, understanding with data. Where do we have the pain points? Oh, there are the spends. This is where we have the gap. Let's change the structure of the team. We changed that globally. And then we have an active sourcer or a headhunter in the US who is actually incredible. Then we have another one in the UK, another one in France, another one in Germany. So we have across the globe. So it doesn't matter where they are. They also understand the market, legal regulations, and everything, and then we can recruit from there. So indeed, very successful talent
And
source.
you've touched on several times. You've mentioned, using AI tools, and I guess the audience might be forgiven for thinking, well, Otto got a big budget and you bought expensive AI software, but you've had a much leaner in-house approach to these tools. So maybe can you explain that to me? How have you approached tooling and using AI and other automation processes? Has it been just a case of spending hundreds of thousands on different
Yes.
vendors, or what have you done?
So indeed, I have not spent that much amount in tools. Instead of that, we have had a lot of, let's say, improvements in tools that we use. One of them being a one-way video interview. So when I joined the company, it's a very simple one-way video interview that has been, of course, helping us immensely. It was let's say the candidate experience could be improved, right? Let's just put it like that. And when I saw that, I thought this is a great platform. I did not get any big budget for for video casting or something like that. I thought if I want the candidates to be themselves and also to tell me who they are and actually pitch for a position, I should also welcome them and I should be the first one who shows an example. So I put myself there, and basically it was a teleprompter made out of an iPad, and I recorded myself welcoming candidates and explaining them what's going to happen. So before it was just this is question number one, question number two, question number three. Instead of that, it was welcome. I am Otto. I am the global head of talent acquisition, and this is what's going to happen today. I'm very happy, and this was just the beginning. So what we can do with this, if we're looking for apprentices, which is a very significant work and labor force here in Germany, apprentices, they have a very difficult time finding new apprentices, and we recruit a lot of them per year. So we can address them. Those are, let's say, they just finished school. They're more social media savvy, so they might also they engage with them. So we create a different content for them. So with that they apply, they feel more engaged. What do we offer them for those young ones that will start their career and their life with us, right? So this is what we're offering, right? That difference. So yeah.
And you mentioned you were doing kind of detailed analysis on market analysis for different roles as an advisor. And are you again building those tools yourselves internally to kind of
Mhm.
find those insights, or are you
Correct.
using
Yes.
products to find those insights?
Yes.
How are you doing that?
So in the past, I have with one team member of mine, I did one tool basically understanding how a candidate, based on their profile, based on their skills or his or her skills, how they could match to a different position that might not be so relevant. If you read the title, right? So we started matching different elements from a profile to the candidate or to a different position that was open. Of course, there are tools out there that will provide that. Nevertheless, what we did is basically creating it ourselves. And now this is what we're looking for. This is what we have in the roadmap, understanding how we will create such a talent matching tool, understanding how a profile from someone from finance could be relevant to supply chain. And I have seen it happen even within Sartorius. So we had one person within finance, was in finance controlling, moving into HR systems controlling, and now supply chain. If you look at the skills from that person in terms of forecasting, vendor management, uh, data, and all, the skills are there. It is really about understanding how to transfer that knowledge. So it's really that knowledge transfer. And now with AI, all the tools, all the dashboard that I'm creating, they are easier to finish. Every time that one uses an AI tool, it continues to build on it. So there are agents that one can create. There are different topics that could be addressed in terms of creating your own tools, creating your own dashboards. But I have to say that it is not necessary in that case. It is really about understanding what is the need, what kind of data we have, and how we can pivot that data to get the analysis that we want, that we need. Before, you needed to know all the formulas in Excel. Nowadays, the tool does it for you, right? So you don't have to go through thousands of JDs, and this is where we're simplifying things. We are looking at different topics such as, let's say, branding, or we're looking at job descriptions, and all of a sudden we decide to change all our, let's say, job description content and make sure that we make our brand promise more prominent. All I have to do is put all those job descriptions in one AI tool, tell the tool what to do, and within 5 minutes, that is all done. If we can build up on that, now we will have the time, because this is what AI is there for. Basically, it's just helping you out to get rid of that administrative task, and the profiles themselves, they're changing, and that trend can be seen. This is basically the analysis that I did, and that analysis I did it with AI. I did it with AI, and it was in my free time, and I did it without AI with the X, and it came to the same result, and it is a valid result with a margin of error of 2 to 3% for a major market analysis, which is impressive. Was done in, I would say, 2 hours, and such an analysis takes months. It used to take months for me.
Agreed.
So
Agreed. What I love about this, Otto, is on its own, your your achievements, your team's achievements are very impressive. Obviously, you're looking at bringing a more localized team to become more globally focused, moving them from more transactional recruiters to more talent advisors, trying to basically set up sourcing teams to reduce agency spend, investing in AI and having an in-house kind of mindset. This is all done by a German headquartered life sciences enterprise. This is to me the biggest surprise. This is not something that
Mm.
anyone expects. First of all, take each part of it. German organizations, typically known as being risk adverse. Life sciences,
Mhm.
typically known as being risk adverse. Enterprises, risk adverse. You're doing all this in, an environment that is just unexpected. And I held this to last, Otto. You've also managed to do this whilst reducing your headcount in TA, but not through laying people off either. So talk me through some of those changes, the positive kind of movement from a larger team to a slightly smaller team and more efficient team.
Yes, yes, and thanks for that. And I think there are quite a few things that I would like to point out, of course. But what characterizes us and makes different from the rest is basically what I mentioned in terms of the innovation. This is something, it is just the city. It is something that is captured in Sartorius. I think it's really in their DNA. It's everywhere. Like I said, you see that innovation everywhere. You cannot achieve something if you don't do it. Of course, and this is where the scientific part comes into place. We don't do it just out of the blue. There are analysis behind it, but that's the difference that we say, okay, let's take the risk. I have to say that it was a team effort. It was not only talent acquisition, but also our initiative within HR, create your own future, right? So we started that initiative at a point where we saw a stabilization phase within our company. We saw there's a stabilization phase. We don't have to hire so much. So now we look at this kind of aspect. So colleagues were creating their future. We did not really have to move someone out of talent acquisition. They saw the opportunity within HR and they moved to HR business partnering. They moved to talent and leadership development. They moved to organizational development. They moved to the different areas within HR, right? So we managed to see, okay, in which area do you want to develop? What skills do you have? How can we leverage that? And then we help them move into that area. And again, of course, we went from, I would say we were over 60, and now we are, last time I saw, somewhere around 40. And we're talking about a significant reduction. Again, it had nothing to do with layoffs or stuff. It was more of a progression within our headquarters in other countries. There was a lot of movements. And that was even better because colleagues that were working for talent acquisition and understood the process and perhaps the pain points when they were going to HR service, they already knew what was happening in talent, so they could understand each other. Or someone from service, HR service, they came to us. So we understood. Oh, okay, so that's the pain point. So that's how we can solve it. And then you have that collaboration between the whole HR team, and this is definitely what helped. So it is really about a mindset. It is really about understanding what are the areas and then giving them the tools to simplify that so that they can have more time. Because, of course, requisitions or the amount of workload still high, but how do we manage that with less people, right? And this is where bookings calendar comes into play, right? Automation again. So one-way video interview, the first interview, it is held with a video interview tool. And this is also in terms of employer branding, this has a great impact, such as one-way video interview. A manager can portray and showcase his team and the place where they will work. How much more personal that gets. So look, this is me and this is my team. This is what you will be doing. You have the courage to do it. That's of course, we have to see how we always portray that because it needs to be professional. It still needs to address the right audience. And I don't want to discuss that in terms of like an object, but we need to understand that the market and the movement it's based on an analysis that it involves people, right? So
And not, I love this, but I guess in conclusion, if you don't mind, um, if we have someone listening to this podcast who just doesn't have the benefit of working for an organization that has that culture in their DNA, as you say, what would your key tip be to leave our audience with to gain that innovation mindset in the face of, you know, difficulty around bringing AI tools in, resistance to change and behavior, the difficulties of the markets out there and the cost pressures. Is there a core piece of advice you'd share with other leaders, a way to navigate this for their businesses if they don't perhaps benefit from that DNA of innovation that you have in
Yes.
Sartorius?
Having that, let's say, startup mentality, I think this will always be one key element, right? Having that urge to try something, to have that courage is one thing, of course, but how do you do it? Because you will not have the buy-in from your stakeholders. And this is where it gets interesting. For me, I always try to understand who is the person in front of me. And usually in the areas that I'm working in, it is going to be a scientist or it's going to be an engineer or someone who speaks numbers. I talk to them with numbers and I explain them. This is the numbers, the way that you do it. These are the numbers if we try it my way. So if you speak the language that they're speaking, data will never lie. So you have the data, you have valid data. Make sure that it's a single source of truth so that there's no deviation and get that data in there because this is going to be its proof. And this is how I have always managed to move with something forward. I always go with the data and I say, this is what we have, and I explain why.
Otto, it's a fantastic story of hiring excellence. I really appreciate you sharing it with
Thank
us
you.
today
Appreciate it.
and for coming on the show today to share it. Otto, looking forward to catching up in person soon. I know we're getting an
Likewise,
hour
likewise.
soon, but thank you for sharing that with the audience today. And hopefully, there's many lessons, but certainly landing on that lessons of speaking the language
Thank you.
of the business time and time again is something that works for all of us. Otto, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll hopefully see you again soon.
Likewise. Thank you very much, Johnny. Thanks. Appreciate it.
No, so, and thank you, the audience member, for joining us today for a live broadcast of your catching up the podcast on your favorite podcast app as well. Don't forget to subscribe, whether you're on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back next week with another fantastic guest on the Hiring Excellence podcast. Until then, take care.